All right, here we go. Hey, Tina Campbell, the New York Regional Partner of Master Networks. We've been doing these lunch and learns for a couple of weeks now with our members, and I'm very excited that they're teaching me a topic that I think is timely and sometimes timeless. And this, I believe, some of this will go beyond the situation that we're currently in, and teach people something. And today, I have a friend of mine, Dahiema Grant, and she's here to talk about what are the two basic financial statements that small business should have. And I was saying before, Dahiema, that I was so excited to have you come and speak about this because so many people, if I may say something like, I know that a company should have or a business should have a P&L, and they'll just look at me, blankly. And that's why I get worried that people don't understand, their numbers in their business. So thank you so much for coming on. And can you tell us about yourself and, about this topic? Thank you.
Yes, you're welcome, Tina. Thank you so much for having me on. It's my pleasure. So I'm an accountant. I work predominantly with small businesses, and I do anything from their monthly bookkeeping to their quarterly tax filing and end of year filing. So I really consider myself as the outsource accounting department for many small businesses. But more than that, what I do love to do is working with people. I love working with people. And I think back in the olden days, I'm not sure if this is still even relevant for
Olden days.
today. In the olden days, I think the accountants were considered very not very people friendly. They're back there somewhere in the computers, and that's it. That's
Yeah,
very tunnel vision. That's all they know.
yeah.
And I love to be with people. I love working with people. I love connecting with people. But I also have this desire to play around with numbers. And it's always been something that I liked. And so working with small businesses really kind of like bring those two together. I'm able to work and play around with numbers, which is the accounting and the financial statement and the reporting, and I get to have this intimate relationship with my clients because I do consider myself as a partner in
Right.
their company, as a part of the team. And so I really do enjoy the small business space. How I got into this, I had dreams as most potential, a CPA or accountants, that I was going to work for a big company. And as I was doing my studies, I started to have friends who started companies or needed help with their companies and could not afford a CPA. And so they will just ask me to do it. And I started to do these things for free.
Of
And
course.
that was like my first real life experience. And so with that, I started working for smaller companies, and it really gave me the insight as what it means to really run a company. And I had the opportunity of also working with small CPA firms and see what that looks like and the different services that they can provide to their clientele. And so that's how it kind of all organically form itself into me really working for myself. And so I, as a small business owner myself, I do know what it takes, but I also have the tools that is needed. And I know the tools that is needed to really run a good, successful practice. And one of those things that I think is often neglected in the small business space is they lack the accountant. And I think this is how I try to separate myself from many small business accountant, is they tend to be very tax heavy. They focus a lot on the year-end filing or even the sales tax. But before that, before the tax return, you need the accountant, because you use the accountant to generate the tax returns.
Right.
So I call it's the chicken or the egg syndrome. Like,
Yeah.
what comes first? Which is more important? And in this situation, they're both important. If you don't have a good set of accurate financial statement, chances are your tax returns is not going to be 100% accurate.
Right.
So the two go hand in hand. So I know many small businesses don't really think about their financial statement. So there are so many different things that I can, that I even talk to my clients about, why you need to make sure you're doing your monthly or quarterly reporting, why you need to know what your numbers look like. Because in order to really run a successful business, it's one of those ingredients you cannot overlook.
Well, Tahima, one of the things we talk about a lot in Master Networks is how can you manage what you can't measure? Like if
Mm,
you're going to make a really
exactly.
a good decision, whether it's how much should I spend on my marketing or how much
Yes.
am I spending, you have to know, you have to be able to look at a snapshot almost, would you agree, on a monthly basis?
Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely.
Sometimes weekly, but at least monthly.
At least monthly, at least monthly. And I think with even the space that we're in right now, this is a very important time for you to know what your numbers are, because a lot of small businesses have taken a hit because of the stay-at-home order. There are businesses, I have some clients right now who they're not really operating, and because of that, of course, the income has reduced. Yes, there are some expenses that have reduced. Maybe there are some wages that have reduced, but if you're going to, once we start operating again, if you're going to know what the next 3 or 4 months are going to look like for you, you better know what your monthly expenses are. You better know what your expected income is going to be. If you don't have an idea of what your numbers are, then it's because you really don't have a good accountant. You don't have a good reporting in place. And so in
Right.
order to know that, you need at the least, you need to know your monthly profit and loss statements.
And do you agree that, I mean, so when people were, we went into the situation and they were possibly looking into the small business administration loans and the other type of what was available, they really had to prove their numbers, I believe.
Right, right.
So,
Yeah,
so those that were able to pivot very quickly to those were the people that really had the reporting to be able to do that.
right. And even one loan specifically with the PPE, that's the payment protection plan. A lot of the small businesses were able to apply for that. But in order to show to have that loan forgiven, you're going to need to look at your numbers to see what your payroll expenses are, and to make sure that that is, well, first of all, you have to make sure it matches up your tax return.
Right.
your,
Right.
your quarterly
That would be
payroll.
bad. Yeah.
Right. So it's definitely good to know. And there are other loans that you can apply for, and you have to show there are other loans and grants that you can also apply for.
Yeah.
And what you're going to need to show is a comparison between the, say, 2 months or the 3 months in 2020 through the virus pandemic compared to last year's.
Right.
So if you don't have those numbers available, you kind of like miss out on an opportunity of
Right.
gaining $2,000 from
Right.
the government.
And I think you and I were talking and we said, okay, so let's not make everybody feel really bad that doesn't have this.
Right.
So what is the best advice to, to small businesses, or I hate, sorry, I shouldn't use small, local businesses.
Yes.
We don't want to talk about that, limiting anybody, to local businesses. What is your advice for, going forward? And just in case they don't have this information.
Right. So I would say you can start today. I say because especially for those businesses who have scaled back in terms of operation, who might not has been not operating as much, that this is the time to start thinking about some best practices that you can put into place as far as your accounting and bookkeeping is concerned. And so, what I would suggest is we are almost at the end of April. So we've gone through January, we've gone through the first quarter. So I would suggest let's start working on those P&L. And I will go through what are the components of the P&L, what does it look like. Maybe you can start creating for yourself P&L for January, February, March, and once April is done, and it starts to get you in the practice of what to expect.
Right. And it's easier probably once you start doing it, it's easier to do it faster and faster each month, correct?
Exactly. And especially because the inflow and outflow of funds are low this time, then it's not very overwhelming.
Yeah.
So, what will that look like on a practical level? Grab your bank statement, grab your credit card. Let's go over your expenses and your income. And I would suggest for those who are very savvy with technology, they can do this in an Excel. they can plug in these numbers on Excel and have Excel create the formulas.
Right.
And for those who can start up, sign up for one of those accounting software, QuickBooks. If you sign up for QuickBooks Online, you get 30 days free.
Yeah.
So that's something. You also have Wave. Wave is an accounting program and it's for free. So that's another software that they can use, but something that they can use to kind of track their income and expenses. And while the time is the operations of their business is slow, this is the time to start really formulating back best practices, so that once the economy opens up and business picks up, you're not starting from zero.
Definitely. I think you were going to show us some like basic P&L and just what that looks like, so it's not scary.
Yes, yes. So don't be overwhelmed by this, but I'll just go through just a few components of the P&L and just
Yeah.
show you what balance sheet looks like.
Right.
So I'm going to share my screen with you, okay?
Yes, please.
Okay, so let's see here.
So that anybody that's been having me or hearing me speak about P&L, it's not scary. It's just usually it can even be one page, right?
Yes, so I'll skip over these parts because we really talked about those. So this is what a basic P&L looks like. So there's different parts of a P&L. And the P&L is also known as the profit and loss statement. That's a P&L, short for P&L, for profit and loss, or it's the income statement. And what it does, it really just tracks your income, which is your revenue, and expenses for a given period of time. So for April, it will basically just record your income, your revenue, and expenses for that month. So this is what it's a standard P&L will looks like. You have on the top portion, you usually have the revenue section. So you look at your bank statement, right? You see all the money you take in, you just drop that figure there, $100,000 if you took in that much for a month. And then after you have your revenue, the next thing that comes in a P&L is your direct expense. And your direct expense is anything that is used to generate the revenue. So for example, if you make clothing, a direct expense would be the materials that you bought, the fabric. So you will subtract that from your total revenue, and then you're left with your profit margin or your gross profit. Okay, and it's really good to know what your gross profit margin is. We're not going to get into that at this point.
Right.
So after you have your revenue, your direct expenses, then you have your you have your operating expenses. And the operating expenses is just as it says. It's the what you spend to run your business. So it's anything outside of the actual direct connection to the revenue. So operating expenses would be advertising, if you place any ads or anything on Facebook or any form of advertisement. It would be your accounting fee, what you pay someone like myself, insurances that you've paid, rent, any taxes you've paid. So these are just some examples of what it costs you to run your business, wages. So then you have that, and then you have your operating expenses. You kind of see what your operating expenses is, and it's good to know what your operating expenses is because you will know what to look for each month. So as an example here, this ABC company, LLC, their operating expense is probably going to be close to $20,000 each month. So now you know what you need to take in revenue each month to cover these expenses. So this is why you see how important it is to know what your numbers are so you can plan ahead. And then from there, you might have some miscellaneous expenses, bank charges, interest charges. And so now you're going to add your operating expenses, if there are any other expenses, and you subtract that from your gross profit. And then you're left with either a net income or a net loss. In this case, it's a net income. So that's just a simple P&L. Get your revenue, your expenses, subtract those two, and you're left with what's left over for the month. And it's good to know what your net income is, because then now you have an idea of, at the end of the year, what your taxes are going to look like. Because your net income is really going to be the thing that you pay your taxes on. So all of this information is really what your accountant will need to then generate your tax return. So going back to the chicken and the egg, if you don't have this, it's hard to produce a tax return. Okay.
And so,
So
so let me ask you something. So when you, I know, I'm sure that you get people that just at the end of the year are just handing you a year's worth of information or receipts or whatever it is, right? And
right.
so and then you're generating whatever the tax is, and they
Mm-hmm.
have no idea. They're probably like waiting, like, oh my gosh, what do I have to pay?
Right. Right.
All of that stress and even the work that you have to do can be done on a monthly basis,
Or a
and a
quarterly basis.
quarterly basis at least. But one of the things that's interesting is there any hard or fast rule, or maybe that your operating expenses should not be over a certain percentage of the total revenue? I mean, is there anything like that? Like you could look at something and say, wow, these expenses are like over. Is there any kind of rule like that you look at when you look at a profit and loss statement?
So there's no hard or fast rule per se, but generally you want to keep an eye on it because the goal is to make a profit. And so if your operating expenses is eating up all your gross profit, then that's a problem. I think the number we tend to look at is that gross profit margin, what we called, and the gross profit margin is just the amount of money you have then available for operations. And so that first top number is really where you want to focus on, because if your gross margin, if you have a high gross margin, that's great. That means you retain more of that money in your company to then cover the expenses.
Yeah.
If you see that your gross margin is too low, then you might want to think of, can you get can you get your materials or your direct expenses at a lower cost, or do you need to increase the rate that you're charging? So I would say focus on the top in order to get to the bottom line that you want to get to.
I mean, it really makes so much sense, as almost like pieces of the puzzle.
Mm-hmm.
How can you really need to have this
You
for
there's
any business.
just no way. I mean, if you're serious about, managing your cash flow, future projection, really even knowing what your tax liabilities are going to be, start making your estimated taxes throughout the year. So at the end of the year, you're not surprised with a huge tax bill. There's just so much good that can come from really looking at your numbers at least monthly.
Okay, great. And I think you had mentioned one other
And so
document.
yeah, so the other one is the forgotten report, and this is a balance sheet. Because a lot of small business don't necessarily use this for tax reporting, for their end of year tax reporting. I shouldn't say a lot of small businesses. You're not always required to file a balance sheet on your tax return. But it's also good to know, because in the event you have someone that wants to invest into your company, they're going to look at your balance sheet, because the balance sheet really shows the net worth of the company. So on the top part of it, there's just three components of the balance sheet. The first section is the asset, which you will have your bank statements, any accounts receivables. Accounts receivables are invoices that you've billed out to clients that you're still waiting to be paid. Any fixed asset you have. So that's the asset portion. And the asset portion is really what you own. So money that you own, things that you own. And then you have the second section is the liabilities and equity. And the liabilities are money that you owe. So that could include any bills, accounts payable, bills that you have not paid, credit cards, any loans, and that would be your liabilities. So when you subtract what you own, you subtract what you owe from what you own, then it's left in what your equity. So then that is the true value of your company. So this is where investors tend to look at. And your equity section could be money that you've invested into the company. We might subtract some money that you've taken out, your retained earnings, and also the profit that you've made for a prior period. So it's an accumulation of the profits that you've made.
So I want to understand. So these are two separate documents.
Yes.
Are they mutually exclusive? It seems like different information is going on this one
Right.
And that, would you say that the P&L would be the place to start?
Yes, I would definitely say the P&L is a place to start, but they feed into each other.
Okay.
They feed in. So, for example, looking at your checking account, for example, the money that you receive from your revenue, it goes into your checking account. So it affects this balance. The things that you pay, your wages, your rent, your advertising, it
Yeah.
affects your bank balance.
Yes,
So the two are somewhat combined.
I understand.
But for simplicity, if you want to start out with a P&L, go start out with a P&L. But these are two reports that all small business owners really need to start becoming friendly with, and really start having a plan of how can I maintain these two reports moving
Mm.
forward.
So, this is it's very interesting. I've been, again, been
Okay.
talking about that for so long. And I really thank you so much, because it started to get me thinking, like, am I doing what I need to be doing, when I need to be doing it? And I think this is so important. And I'm thinking now, when I'm having the time where I'm sitting at my desk, when I'm can think, maybe it depends. Some people, it's hard, they have children at home and they're not getting a chance to really think about this. But at the very least, they could pick up the phone, and they could call you or email you. We'll have
Yes.
your information below in the
Yes.
description of this video, if they can contact you.
Mhm.
How does it work? Like, if they want to speak to you about this, about having you possibly prepare something for them, do they just call you, or how does that work?
Yeah, so usually I like to have a consultation, and I offer a complimentary consultation to, anyone, and I will, kind of like just go get an overview of their company. What have they been doing? And then to see how I can fill in the gap to the things that they have not been doing, or how I can improve on the things that they have already been doing. Because really, some small businesses have been doing,
Right.
they have been practicing due diligence. They have best practices in place. So I would say send an email, a phone call. Let's set up a time for us to talk about what is it that you're doing in your business, where you want to go, and how I can get you to where you need to go.
That's great. And I believe you could do this virtually, right? You could do this around the country?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And that's the beautiful, well, that's one of the good things that comes out of this very sad time that we're going through, is that we can reach a multitude of people all across. And thankfully to Zoom,
Right,
you and
right.
I get to have this session right now. So absolutely. That's something that can start we can start working on today.
That's great. And so I think the biggest advice is, and I heard you loud and clear, and that is start now.
Yes.
Whatever it is, start getting paperwork together, talk to somebody,
Yeah.
get good advice. I think that's key. And then you'll be able to make these decisions, and you won't feel so like that things are out of your hands or out of your control, whether it's in normal times or in times of such as this. So
Yeah.
anyway, Dahiema, I thank you so much. I can't thank you enough. It's great advice. And I can't wait to work further with you on some of these topics. So thank you so much.
You're welcome. Thank you so much
Okay,
for the opportunity.
bye.